Well, welcome to you all and happy National Hydropower Day. My name is Cameron Schilling. I'm Vice President of Market Strategies and Regulatory Affairs at the National Hydropower Association. And I'm thrilled to be talking with you on National Hydropower Day. As a way to kind of collectively recognize hydropower's contributions to bolstering the nation's clean energy infrastructure, we've established August 24th as National Hydropower Day. So I'm joined by an exciting panel of speakers who know very well the value that hydropower plays on the grid and the role it will have in our clean energy future. But before I introduce our speakers, I wanted to talk just a little bit on the background of hydropower in the US. Hydropower and pump storage represent a little over 102 gigawatts of electricity capacity. It's about 38% of all renewable generation, and it can provide almost every service that the grid needs, including critical balancing services that are vital to the integration of other renewables. In fact, we like to say that hydropower often punches above its weight in grid services. A couple of examples to illustrate this is it's 7% of electric generation, but provides 40% of all black start nationwide. Hydro is about 12% of the installed capacity in California, but routinely provides 60% of all spinning reserves, just demonstrating how vital this resource is to reliability and resilience. About half of the hydro capacity is in the hands of private companies, and the other half is managed by the federal government. Today, we're going to hear perspectives from that latter half. The four federal power marketing administrations were created in the early 20th century, largely to sell excess power produced by federal dams, whose primary purpose was something other than electricity generation, be it flood control or irrigation. For decades, these power marketing administrators were able to provide low-cost, clean electricity to preference customers, and they were essential in electrifying the rural parts of this country. So to help us celebrate National Hydropower today, we are thrilled to be taking part in a panel discussion with the leaders of the federal power marketing administrations, as well as the Department of Energy. So with that, let me introduce our speakers. First, we have Pat Hoffman, who is the Acting Assistant Secretary, Office of Electricity for the U.S. Department of Energy. Welcome, Assistant Secretary Hoffman. Next, we have John Hairston, the Administrator of the Bonneville Power Administration. I think this is one of the oldest of the four PMAs. Welcome, Administrator John Hairston. Next, we have Virgil Hobbs, the Administrator of the Southeastern Power Administration. And we have Mike Weck, Administrator of the Southwestern Power Administration. Welcome, Administrator Weck. And finally, we have Tracy LeBeau, Acting Administrator of the Western Area Power Administration, or WAPA. Welcome, Administrator LeBeau. So thank you all for joining us. And I thought we'd just dive right in with some questions. I wanted to address this first one to Administrators Hairston and Hobbs, but anyone else feel free to jump in. Administrators, hydropower has not received as much attention as wind, solar, and natural gas. And sometimes there can be kind of a knowledge gap and misunderstanding when people start talking about hydropower technologies and dams in general. How would you explain hydropower to someone?
All right, well, thanks, Cameron. This is John Hairston. I'll take a shot at answering that question first. So, I'd start off by saying you're right. There hasn't been a lot of press regarding hydropower. Wind and solar are certainly the sexy resources right now, and so when I think about hydropower, I like to think about it in the fact that people tend to forget that hydropower is the original energy resource. If you think about it, humans have used water to power mills and pumps for hundreds of years. And so I like to remind people that dams work by harnessing the power of flowing water, which means that the fuel is free and has no emissions. So it's renewable, it's carbon-free. And given our abundance of hydropower resources in the Northwest rivers, our power system is really the cleanest in the nation, if not the world. And beyond its carbon-free and affordability attributes, hydropower is dispatchable, which means that it can ramp up and down when we need it. And that, when you compare that to other renewables that are more weather dependent, that makes our attributes with hydropower just much more valuable. And I think also, I like to say that with all of the thermal resources that are being taken offline, like coal, the Northwest will rely on dispatchable resources like hydro to meet the power demands, especially during peak demand periods. And so, when you think about hydropower and its attributes, it's really the perfect partner to other renewables because it can really fill those gaps when solar and wind resources aren't producing power. Because sometimes the sun doesn't shine and sometimes the wind isn't blowing, and so you need a really good partner to fill those gaps. And hydropower really plays that role well.
Great, thank you, Administrator. Administrator Hobbs?
So, Cameron, yeah, I would just say I don't really understand that there's a knowledge gap on hydropower. I mean, hydropower technology is simple. It's simple as gravity. I mean, water runs downhill unless we decide to pump back. But that falling water spins the turbine, turns the generator, and electrons flow. So, I challenge the solar industry to explain photovoltaics in a sentence. I remember, I'm dating myself now, but Barbara Mandrell used to sing back in the 70s, she was country when country wasn't cool. Well, hydropower was renewable when renewable wasn't cool. John mentioned, hydropower has been around forever, since the 1880s, actually, it dates back to. And it's the only schedulable and reliable renewable. The world needs an all energy portfolio, and certainly accessing more wind and solar energy is an important component for that. But we need to recognize that, as John said, those generation methods are intermittent. Hydropower is always ready to meet the power demand and can be called upon on those cloudy days and those calm nights. So, like I said, I would just say that hydropower is that dependable resource that's renewable and can be there for us when we need it.
Yeah, we certainly have a rich history of it in this country and around the world too, as the first renewable. Any other want to jump in on this question about how you kind of explain the benefits of hydropower? All right, let's move on to the next one. I wanted to start with Assistant Secretary Hoffman. Ms. Hoffman, you know very well that President Biden set an ambitious goal of using 100% clean energy by 2035 and having a net zero emission economy by 2050. That's pretty aggressive goal. To do this, I think it's clear we're going to have to substantially ramp up the production of all renewables. How can hydropower support the integration of other renewables, specifically like wind and solar?
So thank you, Cameron, for the question. As you mentioned, the president does have an aggressive strategy for combating climate change. 100% clean energy by 2035 and a net zero emissions economy by 2050. As was mentioned by John and Virgil, hydropower is a very important aspect and a very important contributor to our clean energy portfolio. It is generally a mixed use asset. Not only does it provide power, but also provides flood control, irrigation, fish support, and other uses. Just for everyone's awareness, today the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers operates approximately 75 power plants, making them the 5th largest electric supplier in the United States. So there's a significant capacity of hydropower, as you have mentioned in your opening statement, as a resource for the U.S. electric industry. It was also discussed that hydropower is a flexible resource, a dispatchable resources. What this does is it allows us to balance the variable generation mix in the United States, our other renewable technologies, specifically solar and wind. It also provides essential reliability services. And as the grid operates in a very reliable and cost-efficient manner, we need to have technologies that are flexible as possible. And hydropower is at the core of those technologies. One thing I would like to mention is that NREL has done a study recently, and it's called the North American Renewable Integration Study, the NARIS study. And it showed that without the ability to adjust power output from the US and Canadian hydropower fleet, annual system costs could increase by $2.3 billion. So we need to have this flexibility. We need to be able to support a reliable operations of our electric grid. And hydropower is a multi-benefit resource and critical to this clean energy transition.
Thank you for that. I wanted to pull in Administrator LeBeau. Have you seen hydropower acting as an integrator of other renewables in the WAPA territory?
It has, and thanks for the question. I think everybody's actually already made the case in a lot of ways. But I really, the beauty of hydropower for me is the combination of attributes that has been mentioned a little bit so far, and that's it makes it such a unique and clean powerhouse, pardon the pun. Amongst those attributes, and has been discussed, is it's the original renewables, but it's also the original storage as well. So that's also a really important attribute of hydropower and what we bring to the generation mix. It also, as was mentioned, provides both capacity and inertial mass to stabilize the grid, and is highly flexible. So I think, if we really want a clean energy economy and electric grid, we really need to have hydropower in that mix. I think, we should also consider doing more to pair solar and wind to provide a backbone resource and carry electricity through the intermittency of wind and solar supply. And we can and we have helped at WAPA facilitate the delivery of renewables by shepherding the permitting of renewables interconnected into our transmission system. And we've provided debt financing to new or expanded transmission seeking to deliver renewables in our footprint. So, but today, we're highlighting hydropower, and the value propositions in our view is that, it can allow renewables to capture more and more of the energy component. And there's also, we can also ensure the reliability by providing regulation, ancillary services, and black start capability to ensure grid stability as we put more and more intermittent resources on the grid.
Great, and that's a great point about hydropower being a form of storage, which is not often recognized for. Let me pull in Administrators Hobb and Way on this question of hydropower being a kind of a force multiplier for other renewables.
Well, I just want to add to what Tracy and Pat said. Other renewable resources, they lack the natural energy storage mechanism of hydropower. Our lakes, our rivers, that's our fuel. So, Southeastern, we're in the early stages of working with our electric cooperative customers to provide backstand support for their new solar installations. So clouds, and when I'm talking about clouds, I'm not talking about, data storage, nebulous places. I'm talking about, real vapor bearing clouds. They come over a solar array and can greatly and rapidly reduce the energy output. And so our hydropower resources need to be nimble enough to come online and immediately replace that lost generation, then come offline when those clouds dissipate. So, I mentioned pump back earlier, where we have specially designed hydropower, locations that can defy gravity, and they can recharge our lake batteries, if you will. Southeastern captures off-peak energy from our run-of-river hydropower at night to pump water upstream at Richard B. Russell and Carter's pump generation stations. So the next day, those two power plants are ready to produce 1,100 megawatts of zero-emission, on-peak energy for our public power customers.
And Cameron, thanks for the question. And most of the administrators have already covered it, but I would just kind of bolster to say that, as Tracy mentioned, since we have that storage capability, we can come on during the super peak times of the day, and we can assist those renewables of all types in meeting the peak demand. We can come online quickly. We can ramp up to meet the demand quickly, and we're there, if you will, as a backstop in many cases to fulfill the shortfall periods where maybe an intermittent renewable resource may not be able to fulfill the demand need. I would also offer that our load following capability, our ability for these hydro units to go up and down, ramp quickly, respond to emergencies, that fills in gaps where other renewables may not be able to perform. And really, when you look at hydro overall, all the different types, whether it's pump storage, run of the river, reservoir type projects, we fulfill really the best of all features. We have a base load capability with that storage. We've got quick response peaking capability. We've got load following, and we're a carbon-free energy producer.
Yeah, it's something that the grid is going to need a lot more of is clean flexibility, and hydro's been providing it for a long time. I wanted to switch gears and talk a little bit about some challenges. I think, as we've seen in the news almost on a daily basis, extreme weather events like the polar vortex, the wildfires currently raging in the West, and the heat waves that we're experiencing can significantly impact our critical infrastructure. I'd like to get a sense from you all, how has hydropower helped during these emergency situations? Let me start with Assistant Secretary Hoffman.
So thank you for the question. We've all been very challenged with respect to the events that have occurred, and it's a very much an awakening for everybody in the United States. The events on ERCOT have shown some vulnerability in our infrastructure, as well as the need for infrastructure investments. And so the challenge that we need to harden our investments, that we need to make sure that we have flexible investments, that we also need to have transmission capacity. But hydropower is a resource that has provided support to each of these events. And Mike can go into more details of hydropower that has supported the polar vortex and the ERCOT situation, as well as the other administrators can talk about the resources that hydropower has supported in the West during the heat waves. But really, when it comes down to these events and these extreme events, all hands on deck. We need to utilize every resource that's available. And some of the most reliable resources include the hydropower fleet in the United States in support of the reliability to the electric system.
That's great. Administrator Hairston, I was hoping you could kind of address how the hydropower fleet at the BPA was able to help in the California blackouts last summer.
All right, thanks, Cameron. And yeah, so this is a very top of mind topic, and I know the last several weeks have given us probably much more experience than we would have liked, but it's something that's not new. And I would say this, while it's not new, the frequency is increasing as well as the severity of some of these events. But the one thing that's common is the proven performance of the hydro system in helping meet the demands during these events. Specifically, BPA was able to meet high summer demand through careful power and transmission planning, making sure that we do the things that we need to from a forward marketing perspective, as well as all of the veg management work that we're doing on the transmission system. So when these things occur, we have a resilient system and we can get it up and running fairly quickly. I think it goes without saying, without certain dams operating, BPA would have likely had to work with our local customers to shift loads, which basically means altering patterns of the, their use. And, we may have experienced power outages or rolling blackouts in selected areas to protect the transmission system from wider cascading outages. So, the viability and the attributes of the hydro system is important. And a key attribute of that is the flexibility. I mean, that's a common theme you've been hearing in this discussion. And this becomes even more evident during, these extreme weather events like the heat wave that we've just went through, this heat dome, where, you have each individual hydro plant with its flexibility can really ramp up or down quickly to meet unexpected changes in power demand. And when you think about it, the system as a whole is flexible because it can move water through the system in a way that makes it best, its best use for each plant. And the geographic diversity of the hydro system across our region, with major generation on the upper Columbia, lower Columbia, and lower Snake rivers, really give our operators options to solve any unique challenges that occur during whether it's a heat event or a winter event. I think a great example, from my perspective, is during this last winter storm, we had technical issues at our Chief Joseph Dam on the Columbia River, which required us to lean more on our Snake River dams. Adjusting operations, during the middle of the storm was something that was important for us, and hydropower, because of how quickly we can ramp up and down, really provided that flexibility for us to address that issue. I just think that without the dams and the flexibility they provide, powering through these recent heat waves could have been much more expensive and operationally challenging if we didn't have that flexibility.
Great. A lot of planning goes into that flexibility. Any others want to jump in on this question?
Sure, I can address some of the issues we've been seeing here in the WAPA footprint. So there are kind of two types of emergencies that stick out to me. There are those types of emergencies where generation just can't meet demand and leads to rolling blackouts or the prospect of them. And then there's, the prospect of, potential prolonged or cascading outages where the entire portions of the grid may go offline due to equipment failure or some other issue. So in the first case, hydropower is a highly flexible resource, as we have discussed already. And two recent examples where we were able to leverage that flexibility was during the polar vortex earlier this year. Enough surplus hydropower was generated it was a lot of very close coordination between us and the Army Corps to generate some surplus and keep the lights on for almost 800,000 homes for 3 days in the coldest parts of the US during that event. In California, we were able to work with our partner, the Bureau of Reclamation, to provide hydropower from as far away as Glen Canyon and Hoover dams, where it was needed last August, a year ago, during the prospect of rolling blackouts and some rolling blackouts. So in the second case, such as an event of a massive grid outage, like we saw in 2011 here in the Southwest, I'm in Phoenix today, or in 2003 in the Northeast, hydropower was one of the few energy resources that can provide black start services. So many people don't realize that power plants themselves need electricity to run and are affected by outages just like homes and businesses. But since hydropower does not take much energy to get going, it is one of the fastest resources to restart after a large-scale blackout. I would say another weather-related event that we are currently trying to work through is drought. And so we are, closely coordinating again with our generating agency partners to see what sorts of efficiencies and what sorts of operational procedures that we can take to mitigate, some of the issues associated with drought and hydropower generation.
Thank you for that. Administrator Way, I wanted to get your thoughts on hydro's performance during some of these extreme events.
Thank you, Cameron. In Southwestern's region over the years, unfortunately, we've experienced many of the events that you've noted. In the February 2021 polar vortex event, Southwestern and our partners at the Corps of Engineers, we, like Tracy's group in WAPA, provided a key role in providing clean, renewable energy around the clock to our 6 Midwestern states that we market to, which are Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas. And while many other energy resources experienced difficulty meeting several of the cold weather challenges, hydropower was there, and was there as a consistent energy provider during this critical time of need. Additionally, we've experienced and played key roles in power system restoration events following hurricanes multiple times in Texas and Louisiana over the past few years. And just a few events that come back to mind over the years have been Hurricane Rita in 2005, Hurricane Harvey in 2017, and Hurricane Laura in 2020 are 3 events where hydropower was used to either black start the system and work with our other utility partners in the area to provide emergency restoration services and power to critical areas, or we came online or stayed online during those events to serve regional load pockets in the areas surrounding those power projects until such time as the transmission and distribution lines could be restored to service. So like I said, unfortunately, we've been part of several of these events over the years, but hydropower has always played a critical role in restoration.
Yeah, that's great, and I encourage anyone to read the root cause analysis in the CAISO blackouts, because they found that hydropower provided above and beyond its resource adequacy obligations, even considering a kind of a challenging water year. So I think it just demonstrates how resilient the technology is. I wanted to shift gears to my last question, and I'll start with Assistant Secretary Hoffman. having abundant clean power on a secure, resilient, reliable energy grid is going to be critical in the future. We're going to be able to, we're going to have to move cheaper, cleaner electricity from where it's located to the load centers. Can you talk about how hydropower can help modernize our grid to support these goals?
So thank you, Cameron. I think this question encapsulates a lot of the conversation that has already occurred as part of this panel and this dialogue. But one thing to really emphasize as part of this, in order to really have affordability and to think about cost management as we evolve our electric grid and our generation portfolio, is the value of storage. Recognizing that pump storage hydropower provides 93% of the grid scale energy storage today in the United States, it is an extremely important asset with respect to the energy storage equation. If we don't have storage on it, we are going to have to rely on alternative forms of energy storage, which we also would have to rely on demand response, which was already mentioned as part of the opportunities from a cost effectiveness for providing flexible support to the system. So we recognize that energy storage is going to be a critical part of that equation. But by having hydropower in the mix, it allows for that flexibility that the system requires, the black start, the other essential reliability services. But in order to manage costs, we are going to actually have to look at how do we optimize the system, recognizing that a key part of that equation is energy storage.
That's great. Administrators Hairston and LeBeau, any thoughts on this question? Any others want to weigh in?
Yeah, well, Cameron, I wanted to weigh in. I was seeing if Administrator LeBeau wanted to mention something, but I think Pat hit on a couple of key important areas here in terms of storage and cost. And so when I think about those two things, I think about the storage piece really talks about adequacy, us having enough resources in the region, as well as the cost side is really a efficiency discussion and talking about how do you have to modernize this antiquated system in some respect that we have to get more out of it. And so, I think of it, like I said, in two areas: resource adequacy and grid modernization. And in resource adequacy, in my mind, it's the ability to meet consumers' energy needs during times of peak demand. It's like making sure you have enough money in the bank account to cover your known expenses as well as the cost of emergencies. You need to be able to access that money when you need it, the liquidity piece of that. So similarly, you look at utilities, need to be prepared to meet energy demand under all scenarios, not just average conditions. And so in other words, we need the capacity, which relates to the storage argument that Pat was making. That liquidity or that available energy that can be called upon when needed during any extreme event. And so, that's the dispatchability aspect of hydro that, I and the rest of the administrators have talked about during this discussion, which I also must, if you look at it holistically, emphasize it includes deliverability. Since the transmission system is so critical to making sure power can be delivered from point A to point B. So the federal hydro system in the Northwest and the vast transmission system that we have that's connected, really consists of the largest machine, you can think of on the planet. And so assuring that this machine plays a key role in resource adequacy in our region is important, and particularly when we're going to depend less on thermal generation. Hydro will certainly allow us to make a clean energy future a reality. Now, I mentioned the other piece of this is grid modernization. And for us, BPA, we're halfway through a 6-year modernization initiative to enhance the effectiveness and reliability of the grid. This includes 35 some odd projects designed to increase automation, improve accuracy, and enhance visibility into how the federal system and transmission systems are functioning on a real-time basis. So these projects will allow us to really leverage changes in the evolving Western electricity market, which we are seeking new opportunities for marketing the surplus and transmission and maximizing the existing infrastructure or resource infrastructure that we have.
Sure,
Great.
Cameron, I was going to say I have a few things to add as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it was touched on earlier that we do have a lot of dams throughout our country, but really, actually, a small percentage of those are actually equipped to produce hydropower or to facilitate storage. So I think there's some opportunities there for us to take a look at that, as there's an opportunity to site, expand either generation or storage. And the other aspect of this, and we're all also transmission utilities, that there's all this built transmission attendant to these hydroelectricity plants that we deliver from, that was put into place, and some great investment done over the course of decades. I can say with WAPA, with respect to WAPA, we've got over 17,000 miles of transmission in our 15 state footprint. There's a lot of interest, particularly in the east, where we've got fantastic eastern part of our system, where we've got fantastic wind that is looking to go west to the western part of our system. And so I think there are definitely some thinking, some discussion, some dialogue, some planning going on pretty actively right now about how we could facilitate that in some manner. Also, with respect to our 17,000 miles of line and all of the critical substations that we have throughout our footprint that are located in some very interesting areas, there are some opportunities, possibly co-site storage to those facilities that is of great interest both to WAPA and I know for sure the development community. So I think there are some really opportunities for us to optimize the infrastructure we already have and we've already invested in.
Thank you. Certainly a lot of opportunities for pairing with other resources. Well, I know we've covered a lot of topics in a short amount of time, but I did want to give you all a few minutes for any closing remarks on the value of hydropower on National Hydropower Day. And I'll start with Assistant Secretary Hoffman.
So thank you, Cameron, and I'd like to thank the panelists for a wonderful discussion today. I'd like to close with 3 points that I would like to make. And the first point is just how critical hydropower is to our country's energy future. It is critical to achieving the president's goals and supporting clean energy, a reliable electric grid, and resiliency in our energy and our electricity infrastructure. It is absolutely important that we focus on investing in resources that will continue to drive that clean energy mix in the United States, but it will also support the growth of new electricity demand as we look at supporting electric vehicle development, as we look at increasing electrification in the United States. So that portfolio and having hydropower as part of that mix is absolutely critical. The second point I'd like to make is the opportunity. Tracy started talking about it, but our DOE hydropower vision as part of the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy finds that U.S. hydropower can grow in the United States from the 102 gigawatts that I believe you mentioned earlier in the panel session to nearly 150 gigawatts by 2050. And so there is opportunity there for continued investment in a renewable, clean resource as part of our hydropower system. And that will allow us to capitalize on the value. But the third point is in the near term, we recognize that we are in a drought, heat intensive phase from a climate perspective, and we are going to have to maximize the capacity of the existing assets. And so as we look at it, we want to be able to maximize the utilization of the run of the river, but also increase the efficiency of the existing hydropower fleet in coordination with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Department of Interior Bureau. We want to really think about how do we really look at hydropower as an asset for the future. And I believe it has great promise and great opportunity as being part of our clean energy portfolio.
Great. Thank you, Assistant Secretary. Administrator Hairston, any closing remarks?
Thanks, Cameron. And I want to thank you for a great conversation and the rest of the panelists for a lot of thought-provoking comments and remarks. Earlier I mentioned leveraging evolving markets and modernizing the grid. And so, a lot of folks may be wondering why BPA, a federal agency with somewhat limited resources, is driven to invest in these things. And I want to say the answer is, we provide a public service, and anyone served by a public or people's utility district, municipal electric utility, or rural electric co-op in the Northwest really enjoys the benefits of low-cost renewable hydropower. And so, our mission is to deliver the best value to our customers. And in this kind of ever-evolving energy industry, that means investing in opportunities to modernize and to improve operations so that we can meet our customers' changing needs and the region's changing goals for that matter. Now, we've partnered with our public power customers for decades to deliver clean, reliable electricity to businesses and residents across the region. Those partnerships are as important today as they've ever been as we kind of lead the region through this climate crisis. And speaking of partners, BPA has really been fortunate to work alongside the Army Corps of Engineers and Bureau of Reclamation. As federal partners, we work together to preserve and enhance the Northwest hydropower resources. And, the federal hydropower in this region, it's really the original source of electricity. And with climate change bearing down on us, I feel it's comforting to know that we have a reliable base of low-cost, carbon-free power, and it's going to be a central key to us unlocking our clean energy future. And I think, from my perspective as administrator, I'm proud to be part of this worthy endeavor. So thanks.
Thank you. Administrator Hobbs?
Thank you, Cameron. And nice segue, John. I appreciate that. So Southeastern, we're always looking for ways to improve our power products and benefits to our municipal and electric cooperative customers. And during the pandemic, Southeastern was able to distribute the first renewable energy certificates for federal hydropower. So 1.7 million certificates corresponding to actual hydropower generation at John H. Carr and Philpott powerhouses between January 2019 and December 2020. And these were recorded, that generation was recorded in PJM's generation attribute tracking system and was transferred to public power customers in Virginia and North Carolina, which provided a very welcome boost to their economies in those communities, and as well as they were able to take full renewable energy benefits with that hydropower generation. And then customers in all of our we've got 3 other marketed electrical systems, and they are eager to take possession of their renewable energy certificates. And Southeastern will begin the public process for our Cumberland system, which serves customers in 8 states, both inside and outside the Tennessee Valley area. So, and I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank NHA for this opportunity to plug hydropower. And I also want to thank the dedicated civil servants at Southeastern Power Administration and our generating partner at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They contract, they dispatch, they operate, they maintain, and support all those functions behind the scenes to deliver clean, renewable, carbon-free federal hydropower to more than 12 million energy customers. And just on behalf of Southeastern, I want to just say happy National Hydropower Day.
Thank you, Administrator. Administrator Way, any closing remarks?
Well, thank you, Cameron. And I just want to thank the National Hydropower Association and the department and my fellow panelists for the opportunity to recognize National Hydropower Day. While you've heard about many of the benefits and advantages that hydropower brings to the renewable energy landscape and to the goals of the Biden administration, we also face a lot of challenges, not unlike any other energy resource. As climate change impacts occur, drought, as we've talked about today, looms as a key threat to our marketing plan and our program. The loss of fuel resource for hydropower production can impact millions of end users of this renewable resource, and planning and preparing for drought and its impacts are a priority for our staff here at Southwestern. One of the several ways that we're preparing for drought and its impacts and just threats to the hydropower program while minimizing rate impacts to our customers is to develop financial strategies for purchasing replacement power. We're working with the department and many others to implement self-financing initiatives that'll allow Southwestern to establish sufficient financial reserves that if we enter a long-term extended drought period, we've got the ability to fulfill that replacement power needs. This initiative also would help provide rate stability to our end-use customers. And while the current drought situation would result in extensive purchase power expenses that have to be repaid in a short term and impose rate volatility, if we can get this implemented, it will allow us to have the financial reserves available to mitigate rate volatility by flattening those spikes of those heavy purchase periods. We look forward to implementing those solutions and many others to the challenges that we face with climate impacts in the future. And we're proud to contribute to the diversity of the energy resource portfolio across the nation. Quite frankly, Southwestern and our employees are honored to serve the 10 million American citizens and end users we have with clean, renewable, carbon-free energy. Our heritage goes back 78 years to our inception with the Department of Interior and then later to the Department of Energy. And we look forward to decades of service to the American public to come. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today.
Well, thank you. Administrator LeBeau, I think you're in the closing position, so any final remarks?
Well, after all of those great remarks, I'm really fighting the urge just to give it an amen and end it. But that was, I think everybody made some fantastic points. All of them resonate very strongly with Western Area Power Administration as well. You know, for more than 100 years, you know, hydropower and the transmission that was built to carry it across the country, you know, we've talked about it today. It's provided renewable, reliable electricity to millions and millions of Americans. And it's provided all of those other really important goals: flood control, supporting navigation, recreation, and water and irrigation supplies throughout all of the territories within which we operate. So I'm very hopeful that as technology matures and improves to address the historical concerns that have surrounded hydroelectric development, and as capacity becomes available on existing lines, particularly as we're seeing, you know, retirements on our systems, those provide some really intriguing opportunities, I think, for all of us and for the customers that we serve. I think there's also a way for us to play a part in the climate change solution. So I will share with everybody that I know that our WAPA employees are also very proud and committed to be a part of that mission that provides the original renewable generation to the communities in which we live and believe in. And happy to be a part of today's event, and thank you.
Well, thank you to all our speakers. You all do such important work that is critical to our clean energy future. And I think you articulated well, not just the value of hydropower, but the value of our federal fleet that it provides on a daily basis. So I appreciate all that you do. I also want to offer NHA as a resource to you. If we can be helpful to your missions, we'd love to partner more. In closing, so thank you for joining us today, and we hope you found this discussion informative. On National Hydropower Day, remember that hydro is critical to the nation's clean energy infrastructure and resilience of the electric grid. It ensures the stability of the grid by being flexible enough to quickly provide dispatchable generation, all while keeping the power system in balance. Thank you again. Have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion.